Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Real Estate Live. We're delighted to have you here with us this afternoon. We are going to be talking in a few moments about our town centres and what we need to do to revitalise them, and also what has been going on during COVID. We have seen a great revitalisation, and it would be great to hear from our panel about what's going on. Now, Real Estate Live is with us all week. We have lots more sessions coming up on Thursday and Friday, and you can also visit our website, redestatelive.co.uk, to find out what you've missed and also catch up on some of that via our video content. Now, this afternoon, we do really want to hear from all of you that are watching. We want to make this as interactive as possible, and I'm sure everybody is very well accustomed now to how to do that on Zoom. But just as a reminder, you do have the Q&A button that you can use to put your questions, and you can also chat to us. And we'd be delighted to hear from you. And as I say, share your thoughts, views, comments with us this afternoon. Now, I'm delighted now to be able to hand over this session to our chair for today, and that is Patricia Brown from Central, who's going to take over and introduce you to our panels. Thanks very much, Patricia. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. It's my great pleasure to be here today to talk about this really important topic. Now, it feels as though one of the things that we are talking about on a regular basis, and have been for, certainly for the past 25, 30 years of my professional life, is about the revitalisation of our towns and our high streets. And our town centres have been on, as they say in the trade, a journey where there's been, as a consequence of a whole range of societal changes, demographic changes and technological changes, there have been structural changes going on for quite some time. Once upon a time, we used to talk about the death of the centre as a consequence of out-of-town retail. More recently, there has been, through the trend to online shopping, the desire, the significant downturn in traditional real estate, retailers, where 15-year-old companies such as Boohoo have been buying up brands and stores which have been in existence with us for over 250 years. Now, there's a great amount of work that's actually being done to look at the future of our towns and cities, to look at the impact that the pandemic those structural changes have been having on our places. And if you add to that the change in planning requirements and the move to permitted development rights, I think it's fair to say that the only constant is going to be change. So how have we been adapting, and how will we be adapting and taking a dynamic approach to stewardship in our town centres so that they survive and thrive? And critically, they are places that are appropriate and fit for purpose for the people that they serve, in whatever the functions of those town centres are. So I'm really keen to know what success looks like and who is responsible for ensuring this ongoing stewardship of our vital town centres. So I'm joined by 4 experts today: Tom Pike, David Jobling, Vanessa Dehullu, and Kirsten Henly, who are going to give you their perspective on this vital topic. And I'm going to kick off with the first speaker, we're going to kick off with the first speaker, who's Tom Pike, Assistant Director of Stevenage. Now, Tom's main role is really centred on the regeneration of town centres. But crucially, he also has planning and communications and council housing in his brief, which gives him the perfect toolkit to actually look, I would hope, at a very sort of multifunctional town centre. Tom, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you. I think in looking at town centres and the experience of Stevenage, I would suggest that we've got a once-in-a-generation opportunity to embrace the significant changes that people and businesses need to regenerate and transform a town, and in our case, Stevenage. We're absolutely thrilled that in recent months we've secured nearly £38 million of town deal funding in support of this, and really worked very hard to try and move the town centre from being a predominantly shopping-based, car-based, pedestrianised, semi-pedestrianised town centre into something that is vibrant with a range of facilities on offer. So very much at the heart of our plan is a thriving, sustainable centre, and learning from the Grimsby Review, learning from other examples elsewhere, looking to try and create places for people to live, really great public realm, really great places for people to walk, great sustainable transport connections, and things to do in the evening. It's easy to say that and much harder to work on delivering that. And where we are today is the product of several years' work with partners and across partners vitally to get to this point in time, and will be in the future too. So a few things about Stevenage, very briefly. We have a very proud and pioneering history as the first new town, very strongly held values expressed through our town motto, the heart of a town lies in its people. And we've got a real legacy of 1960s design. So lots of green parks, lots of cycleways, a really strong economic area that is home to Airbus, space and defence, and also one of the largest cell and gene life sciences clusters in the world. So some real opportunity for growth. And we've got stark challenges too, skills and health deprivation, and like other new towns, very old infrastructure that's aged at the same time. So we've got the challenges are clear, and the way to tackle it, the way that we've been tackling this, is to make sure we've got a very strong partnership approach that was formed more than 5 years ago by key public sector partners and has grown, bringing businesses, bringing in community groups, making sure that we've all got a shared stake in the current and future of the town. It's also rooted in making changes now, some visible changes, improving the town square, improving the streets and so on in the town centre, making it a really attractive place to be, but also looking at the scale of change and entering into a partnership with Mace Developments to regenerate 14 acres of the town centre, bringing in mixed living activities, a brand new civic hub, a new health facility as well. And now all of that is being ignited and reinforced through our town deal, which brings extra money for leisure provision, for culture and heritage at the heart of the town, and improved green spaces and cycle links. So all of that's a good description of what's to happen. There's lots to be done, and to get there will be a partnership activity across the public and private sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You were beautifully on time. So thank you. I'd now like to turn off my alarm and which I'm failing on, and hand over to our next speaker, which is David Jobling, who's the director of the Arcadis government team. Partnerships was very key to Tom's success, and that's something that that David is very much at the heart in. He's also been behind a number of successful applications totaling nearly £250 million in high street funds and town centre deal programmes, and he is now going to give us the benefit of his expertise. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Patricia.
Thank you.
I think the first starting point for all local authorities, and Tom's talked about this, is recognising that every place is different. There's no individual solution to this that you can cookie cutter across the country. You know, Bill Grimsby speaks very passionately about that's the thing that's caused the problem, cookie cutter solutions. So there's kind of three key steps we see local authorities that have been successful in this space taking. The first is creating a vision that's unique to their place, that builds on its strengths. And I know Kirsten in a minute will mention some of the strengths of somewhere like Kingston and the way they're building on that. And also recognises what the people that live there and use the place want. So that might be people that live there, it might be people that work there, it might be businesses that invest there. And as you say, that partnership between those people and support of that vision is absolutely key. Once that vision's there and supported by a broad range of people, the local authority's role, as I see it, is really to take ownership of that vision and making sure it happens. increasingly, it's as first mover and investor, whether through government funding and grants or prudential borrowing, through development companies, whatever it is. It's quite often the public sector at the moment that's having to prove the concept, demonstrate there's viable schemes there, demonstrate that vibrancy can be brought back to places with interventions that don't follow a simple cookie cutter approach that lots of people are already using and used to. And then finally, having proved the concept works, it's about building on those partnerships, bringing in the private sector, gaining their support to drive differentiation, to bring in supportive investment and to really transform places into places people want to spend time. So that's not a place where you can only go and go shopping. It's a place that when you turn around and think, what do I want to do on a Saturday? I actually want to spend time in a place because the environment's nice, because the spaces I can do things, because if I decide I want to go and pick up some things, I can do some shopping. If I want to, spend some time in some public realm with some friends, meet outside, have a coffee, I can do all those things. What that then engenders is the opportunity for additional uses to come into play. We've talked about, retail is not the core of the high street anymore. The core of the high street of the future will be a combination of retail, yes, housing. People will come back to live in high streets that are well designed, that are places you want to live. Yes, it will still be a hub of business. But importantly, and another role local authorities will play, is in the public services that are offered there that give people a reason to come to high streets, to spend time there, to access important public services that they value. So going back to those three things, I think local authorities, it sounds simple and it's definitely not. Create a vision and get your stakeholders and communities aligned around it. Take a lead role in making it happen. That means you're going to have to be brave and drive things. And then support the ongoing investment that's needed from other partners. Take that programmatic approach and make sure there's the support there to drive it forward.
Brilliant. I have got the sweet spot of speakers today. Thank you for being on time again. I am now delighted to hand over to the previously trailed Kirsten, who I've known through her various roles in Birmingham and in Shrewsbury, where she took that unique approach and is now applying her skills in the Royal Borough of Kingston's town centre. So Kirsten, over to you, please. Tell us the Kingston story.
Thank you very much, Pat. And yes, I head up a business improvement district. We were the first business improvement district that was set up in the country. My daily task is to work with 750 businesses and organisations which are operating in the town centre and deliver projects and services and change that they want to see happen that best supports their place for their employees, for their clients, for their customers and for residents. So in 2020, we began our fourth 5-year term. And of course, we've gone through, like everybody, a huge amount of kind of coming together from a partnership perspective, both at an operational and strategic level. But we're starting to see, at least in these early stages, how a town like Kingston may start to emerge from the pandemic. And some of the things that we're seeing and that we're benefiting from as an outer London town centre is that we are seeing more loyalty to our town centre. Our footfall is somewhere between 5 and 10% down on 2019 levels, which is really, really encouraging in the context of the amount of restrictions that we've still got. And we've certainly seen that local loyalty and people using the town centre very differently over the past 3 months or so. We've also seen many new businesses set up in Kingston. That includes retail, by the way, but leisure and hospitality. We've welcomed some quite innovative meanwhile uses into some of our unused and long-standing vacant units. And our university is a very, very active player in our town centre and has actually taken on one of our units to help promote students and give them work experience and help them sell some of their products through the art school there. And we've had some outstanding and really quite incredible news in that Unilever have announced that they're going to be relocating their European headquarters to Kingston and bringing with them 2,000 jobs. And that alongside quite a significant announcement by our local authority to regenerate their public estate in the town, is now starting to kind of present a very, very interesting and dynamic and forward-thinking 5 years plus for us as a town centre. And we absolutely have to do that hand in hand with our heritage, our history and our culture, and the assets that we've got, being a riverside location with wonderful green spaces. So what's our role? What is the Business Improvement District? What's Kingston First doing in terms of trying to knit some of this activity together and make sure that we take people along us on that quite significant regeneration journey? Well, we partnered with our local authority to, as David articulated, to start to set out a vision, a collaborative vision, and actually we made ours a kind of COVID recovery plan, and it's very, very, very difficult to think long term at the moment, but we've set a sort of 5 to 7 year plan about how we want to steward the town through change. And also at a very practical level, we were mandated by our businesses to think much harder, much clever about how our streets and spaces in the town centre connect all of our assets. And we've been asked to raise the quality of the experience and improve our green and social spaces. And with that in mind, our local authority have empowered us to lead on the redesign of 2 key spaces in the town centre, a green heritage space and a riverside open space. And we're also at the moment looking at how we can transform some traditionally seen highway areas of the town centre and soften those with seating and planting, and just start that trial and piloting of getting businesses and the local community to see how some of these spaces can work harder and better, not just for businesses, but people wanting to come in and use the town centre. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to spend in our town centre either. So a number of things going on for us, and I'd absolutely echo what David has said and what we'll probably talk about a lot today, which is there's no one-size-fits-all solution for thinking about how town centres evolve.
Super. Thank you very much, Kirsten. And I'll come back to that bid story later on. So I'd now like to bring in, with in the idea of there's no one-size-fits-all solution, a woman who actually looks across the piece at different approaches that people are taking, having cut her teeth working as an economic development person on a very successful town revitalisation in Roeselare. I'm going to get that. Roeselare in Belgium. And Vanessa Dehullu is going to talk to us about her experience within that, which was picking up the principles of the Grimsby Review, and then what else she's seen from other places since leaving the town and becoming a consultant. Over to you, please, Vanessa. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for this introduction. I've already planned a visit to Stevenage and Kingston, because it all what I heard is like music to my ears. So I began working with Bill since 2013 when he launched his first city centre plan, and from there on we worked together for 3 Grimsby reviews. And now I'm using this expertise to help other city centres and councils. And I was asked what are the key areas to work on as a town centre, as a local government, to get your cities thriving. And I've heard so many good examples here already, but I've summed up five areas where town centres need to work on. First of all, I've already heard it here, it's leadership. Not only political leadership, but also leadership from the bids, local communities or high street assemblies, if there are any. So, and what I've heard from Kirsten, it's fantastic. So have the courage to have a plan, to have a vision, to write it down, and to come out publicly with it and take some bold decisions. Do some things that are not done anywhere else. Make it unique. Make it recognizable for your city. It can be a very small city. Every city has something that they are unique from. Maybe it's a beer, maybe it's a castle, maybe it's a green park, maybe it's gardens, I don't know. But make it something that is your own DNA, and then put something into plans, and don't be afraid to make some bold decisions. But stick with them. Don't change it. If it's not worked in 6 months or a year, stick with the plan. And Bill always said, hold it. So don't change everything. 5 years is a realistic time spread to have a plan that is really effective, that is going on, that you can pick the first fruits of. So 5 years is a realistic plan to put into account. Then second, so the first thing is leadership and making bold and strong decisions. Second is strong local communities. So I already mentioned the bids. There are the high street assemblies, but maybe also, and it's a bit of a bold decision maybe, but the owners of shops, the shop owners or developers or community workers, people who are really interested in investing and giving back to the city and are not afraid to come out with a vision and an opinion, give some fundings to the people and make them a part of the plan. Make them the ambassadors of the plan and involve them. If you have some green organizations, maybe they want to rethink the high street on greening. So you already have them support from the get-go, and you can work together with them. Third, so one, leadership. 2, strong communities. Third, you have to do something with the properties. So maybe what was a high street before, some few years ago, is not a high street anymore. Skip it. Have some developers, have some plans for rehousing those streets. Talk to the property owners who have vacant properties or who don't do anything, who neglect their properties. Have the courage to talk with them and ask them what they need. Do they need something, or do they want to do something? Do they need some permits? What is the problem with their properties? Then, as a local authority, have the courage to invest yourself. If there is a property that you see that is really interesting, it's the heart of the city, but you have a school that is looking for some place, or you have a library that needs to be redone, or public spaces, anything. So have the courage to invest as a local community and maybe build a local center and give back to the people in that way. And then also very bold, but maybe necessary, have empty property rates for landowners who have property in the high streets and who are really neglecting those properties. Have the courage to have property rates on those buildings, because it's only then that some owners are willing to do something with the properties. The fourth is public domain. I already heard a lot of beautiful things like regreening, redesigning, have some really great features, an Insta wall, something on the wall, something interesting that makes the shopping streets agreeable to walk in. Also smart. I've not heard it already, but have some sensors, maybe do some measurements on your footfall, so that as a council you know how many people come in and out of your town. Maybe have some smart mobility in the morning. It's not necessary to make the streets not accessible for cars, but in the afternoon when there's a lot of footfall, maybe then you can close some streets. Not every town is worth doing that, but in some bigger towns, that could be a solution. So you have smart mobility and you look and try. And like I said, it's trial and error. It's using or seeing some things and trying it out. So the last thing, and I've heard, I think it was Tom say, vibrant cities. Events have a calendar whole year through that makes it an interesting place to come through for your own residents, so for the people, the local people, but also for people that want to visit your town. So make it interesting, have some eye catchers on public domain, have a fair, have something to do with food, a market, a whole year through, and make sure you have a regular calendar and something to do every month that raises footfall and then creates a revenue for the people who have a shop in the city center or have some other things that they want to do. So I think that are the 5 things I think a city need to work on if they want to have their high streets rethought and redeveloped.
Great. Thank you ever so much. There's a lot of commonality there. The word courage came up quite a lot. The notion of diversification, the spine of public spaces and greening is critical. Be unique. And interestingly, with some exceptions, including Vanessa, there's been less about infrastructure and transport and mobility. And maybe we can come to that in the questions. I would like to invite everybody that's watching to pose some questions in the Q&A section, if you will. But for the moment, I'm just going to ask and poke a little bit myself. Now, all of those things were brilliant, and I loved hearing your contributions and the passion and vision for the topic. Thank you very much, everybody. But you made it sound easy. So, and this is potentially, going to be to help people who are struggling. So can we think about some of the challenges, that you've come across along the way, and how you've actually, either in the town that you're in now, the place you're in now, or have dealt with in the past? What are the pitfalls, especially if you think about, we heard Vanessa talk about property. Empty properties. We've skated over that topic of vast reams of empty properties. So, Tom, would you like to kick off? What are some of the challenges you think are around?
Certainly. Thanks for the question. I think some of them are about the point in time you are in the cycle of trying to transform. So, I think in Stevenage, a few of the key challenges we faced and still continue to face are. One is probably public perception, in that I think there's still something of a yearning for the past of a town centre, of a high street, for example, but particularly in Stevenage, the town centre, of what it was like 15, 20, 25 years ago, or in the case of a new town, at its inception, where more people went, and there's a strong sense of passion and nostalgia for the past, and with that, a longing perhaps towards shopping in particular. So I think one is sort of helping work constructively with residents, with businesses, with different community groups to show what the future could be, and that having shops alongside places to work, alongside places to eat, and places to live is a good thing, and is a good opportunity. But yeah, I think probably challenge number one would be recognizing that might not be an argument that ever fully dies down, but does flare up, more than flare up, that comes through intermittently. I think probably secondly is how to unlock areas that are in steep decline, that are in private ownership. So I was struck by others talking about the need for courage, and Vanessa in particular. And in one case, there was a part of Stevenage, part of the high street in the town centre, where we've partnered with others to bring back a kind of a key former Marks and Spencer's building and some other buildings adjacent to it, to have a gym and office space and restaurant on the ground floor, cafe restaurant on the ground floor, and flats and a green roof and so on, where you can't persuade every landowner to do to kind of give you the vibrancy that you want to achieve, because they've got a business plan that they work to. But it is really important to have the courage to show what could happen, what they could do if they were active, if others were active. What could you do to make this better for the owner, but also most importantly better for the place, better for the people who live there? They're perhaps two challenges I'd focus on for now.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Let's go to Kirsten in Kingston.
I think two challenges that constantly come up in most places is resource, and resource being the thing that stops you doing the thing you want to do. And I'll explain in a little bit more detail in a second, but radiators and vacuums. Resource, the challenge that often comes before you kind of get your foot in the door with folks that are worried about changes. We don't have the money to do it. We won't ever have the money to do it. Let's not even think about it. And actually, one of the things that I found is that thinking about it helps find the resource to do it. And we certainly experienced that in Kingston, where pre-pandemic we got collaboration of partners together to look at our Reimagining Kingston Town Centre Streets and Spaces strategy, document that cost in the tens of thousands. And within 18 months, we managed to catalyse resource to start to develop the two public spaces that I mentioned, and also attract £1 million worth of funding to repurpose one of our empty units on the riverside. And that is a very quick turnaround, but it shows that it can be done. So don't let the resource blockers block you coming up with an idea about change. The second one is about radiators and vacuums. So find the place radiators, the people and the organisations and the groups that give off good energy about making stuff happen. And don't avoid your place vacuums, but just know where they are. Know where their pull is, and just work out the best way that you can manage their expectations about change so that you can still move forward and you're not constantly getting sucked back to wherever the status quo is that you're trying to move away from.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I have an expression called enabling disablers, and sometimes those place radiators and place vacuums are the same person, the enabling disablers. They make things happen. They can stop things from happening. But I'm going to come on to this notion of how to lead in town places, town centres, if we have time. Vanessa, please. Challenges.
Yes, and I hope that town centres and leaders and mayors all over the world have the same let's say, thrive and passion that they had in the COVID crisis, because you saw in the COVID crisis, everything was possible. If you only had, like Kirsten said, if you think about it, you focus, you have a plan, and you say, this is where we're going to, then everything is possible. But indeed, the pitfalls, you have property owners that will never want to sit down with the local council, that will never want to talk with you. You have nostalgic people that want to go 20, 30 years. Again, we had a street that we changed the direction of because we had like a circulation plan in the city center, and one street we changed the direction where they could drive. And that's when I called Bill and said, after 1 year, the shop owners were complaining so much, and he said, hold it, don't change your whole mobility of your city center again for some people that are negative. So don't let them drag you down. I think one of the pitfalls is also political reasons, political courage. We have every so other year a new mayor, a new council, and another vision. And I think the people surrounding, or the civil servants, or even the consultants, have to have those straight and narrow vision, and have to maintain draw the line, even if there are political changes throughout the years. But I think that we are the consistent voice that needs to be heard, and don't let the vacuums pull you down.
Thank you very much. And David, last but not least on this.
So I'll pick kind of two things that are maybe a bit more specific. So one challenge for me is, you talked about connectivity and we haven't talked about it much. Mm-hmm. That transformation of connectivity and creating a place people can get into easily, but then navigate easily, that isn't car dominated, in the UK, we've got towns and cities all over the country where there's a high street, the shop owners who passionately believe unless someone drives down that high street, they're not going to get any footfall. They don't get people visiting their shops. There's some interesting work being done by TfL that shows that someone who walks to a high street spends a multiple of what someone who drives to that high street will in the place. So having the bravery to transform places and, as Vanessa said, really sticking with things. And I think COVID's given people a great opportunity to trial some of that. We've seen low traffic neighbourhoods introduced. We've seen a whole host of things. There's been some uproar about them and there's been some real support. But there's some real signs of success for what that's done to places, the ability to very quickly pedestrianise high streets. There's now quite a passionate movement where I live in Leamington for the parade that runs through the centre of Leamington to remain pedestrianised. Historically, that was entirely unthinkable. It was kind of the main route up through town. The other big challenge, I think, is reintroducing different uses into places that have historically been so heavily retail focused. And I think there it is about a couple of things. One is, as we've talked about, working with property owners. And the other is about being brave and making things happen, identifying the opportunity for residential development. And as a local authority, finding a partner who believes in the place, who will invest with you and driving that transformation yourself. You can't always get everyone on board, everyone lined up and all the things to happen in the collaborative and cohesive way you'd like to. You know, I talked at the start about a vision that's supported by all your stakeholders and all your communities are behind and all that sort of thing. But getting that in place can be quite difficult. So sometimes just getting started, making those changes, proving that the value can be driven from, for example, a residential development and a new neighbourhood is exactly what local authorities have to do. And being that disruptor and being prepared to kind of get your elbows out, use the powers at your disposal and make things happen is how you overcome that challenge, to be honest. Great.
Thank you very much. A really full set of answers, and there's an awful lot, to unpack in them already. At some point, I want to come on to this notion of leadership, and if we get time, and how do we bring how do we get the skills to ensure we've got the right people within this? But we now have a question from an anonymous attendee, and it's what are some of the key challenges facing town centre regeneration in the light of recent planning reforms, such as use class E and permitted development rights? So who wants, Tom, is that something that's occupying your mind at the moment?
Yeah, very, very happy to give an initial view. I think there's some, you can unpick this change as having different causes. So one of the reasons to bring this forward might be from the government just to find ways to bring the footfall back in, to find ways to repurpose property to try and change town centres. I think those thought processes about wanting to bring diversity and vibrancy and fewer empty properties, actually there's real merit in that. I think the point that I've made, others have made during the course of this session, is about making sure that the quality of the place and the uniqueness of the place is maintained. So I would tend to recognise the shift that needs to take place in town centres and greater diversity, but I would strongly advocate for changes of use to be locally worked through with the community, with different businesses, with different stakeholders, so that you can try to help curate the next 5 to 10 years instalment of your town centre or equivalent, and work out where you think it's best to consolidate particular types of uses and create vibrancy in different areas. So that would be my general view, because it takes a lot of work to create good quality housing, and our partners Mace are doing lots of thinking and work on that at the moment, that creates vibrancy. What you want to avoid, and what we would want to avoid best as we can, is sort of housing that doesn't quite meet the needs of the people of the town, or isn't quite enough to move a place forward. So that's broadly, I think, where we are, is that we would much prefer to see kind of local ownership, albeit there is some fairness in the sentiment of needing variety.
Thank you very much. David.
So I'm not going to speculate on the reasons for the change. I think we know what a lot of those are, and I'm not a planner by background, so I'm not going to get into too much detail. I think what I would say is that the response to permitted development and the changes in that, and the kind of role that a local authority can play in overcoming some of the challenges, is very much rooted, and I sound like a broken record, I know, in them having a really clear vision for their place. And that's a vision that is broadly supported by people, which means you're less likely to get people taking advantage of permitted development rights in a way that counterbalances what you're trying to achieve. But also it's one that people are really aware of and can see progress towards, because if you then take the interventions to make that vision become a reality, what will happen over time is, regardless of particular individuals and individual developers who make decisions that might sit outside of your vision, and regardless of the kind of legislative framework that it operates within, robust and strong visions permeate places quite quickly. There are some brilliant examples of that at different scales in different parts of the country. The one I quite often come back to is Birmingham. Birmingham City Council had the big city plan. For those of you familiar with Birmingham, that was never an adopted document, and it never had any planning power. But over the course of 10 years, the city of Birmingham has changed largely in accordance with that plan. Now, that was a well-consulted on document that was broadly supported by people, and it was very clearly seen as the direction of travel for a place. Now, lots of places through Future High Street Fund, through town deals, we've been involved in them in kind of Walsall to Bishop Auckland and all sorts of places in between. They're developing those visions. They've created master plans either in advance or as part of that process. And so now it's incumbent on those people to stand behind those master plans, to be brave, to promote them, and to build on the consensus that they've inevitably built around them to make them successful. And to be honest, I think it will mean that development doesn't have as big an impact as some people fear it could. Because if it's really clear that a local authority in a place is heading in a direction, as we've seen in Birmingham, as I mentioned, as we're starting to see in places like Walsall, that will happen, and it will become something that the odd developer trying to do something that the rules allow him but no one really wants to happen won't get in the way of.
So you obviously haven't seen the new city plan that's bringing forward, but I'll skip over that. I like your answer. I'm not being. No,
I've seen it. I just consciously wanted to focus on the success of the previous one.
Yeah,
and I think that's the important thing here. There's an evidence base of set that vision, and people will follow it if it's broadly supported.
Brilliant. So this takes us back, Kirsten, to the time we worked together in Shrewsbury. Would you like to pick up the story and answer that question for yourself, please?
Which bit would you like me to focus on, Pat? Is this around just thinking about how you create a vision for a place? Because the things I was absolutely inspired by David, and kind of worked in Birmingham in the early days of the big city plan being socialised in the city. And what was fascinating about the big city plan for Birmingham was it wasn't owned by the council. Well, it was, but actually it was absolutely owned by all corners of the community as well, particularly the business community, who were champions of it on virtually a daily basis. And I think it is absolutely something to inspire other places, and it certainly inspired my thinking when I was in Shrewsbury and we were looking to try and create not necessarily a statutory planning document, but a narrative and a vision and an aspiration around how a market town in Shropshire could evolve and develop itself and bring the community along with it, and not just do that, but also make sure that the community was championing it too. And Shrewsbury have done a brilliant job over the past few years and continuing to think long term about their future. And I think it just shows that you don't have to be a big city to have big ideas about your place and to bring people together to really say, here's what we want to do, here's what we want to be, and here's roughly how we want to do it. So that's a little bit about kind of where we try to and my successor has done a brilliant job in Shrewsbury in taking that forward. Just coming back to the question around what sort of policies are keeping us up at night in our places, I'd agree with Tom and David. It's a bit too early to tell about the class use change for us in Kingston, but there are other very, very practical issues that do keep me and my members and our local authority up at night, and they are just things that are well talked about, like business rates and how we tax bricks and mortar. We've still not sorted that out, and it's still an issue, and it's going to be an issue if we want to give our high streets and our local centres a fair crack at the whip of making businesses and creating establishments and social organisations that are going to really revitalise and continue to make our town centres community-oriented places. So for me, the business rates review has got to be up there with what many other kind of colleagues of mine would be thinking about, and also just the housing challenge in general, and what places are being expected to pick up, in some cases really quite extraordinary and eye-watering numbers of housing units. We know it's an issue, it's absolutely a national issue, but what kind of housing is going into our places, how much of it? And what we don't want to be seeing is the pendulum going from town centres that were full of retail to town centres that were just full of resi. There's got to be workspace and healthcare and education that goes into these places to continue to make them communal, social, as well as commercial centres.
So thank you on that, Kirsten. And I think, there's another question coming, and I'll come to that in a second, but just picking that up, because what all of you are thinking is about consistency of purpose, of vision, and leadership, and knowing what your town or city is for, and pushing that into action. And that's something that you did, Vanessa, in Rusalera. And it would be good if you could just give us a minute's pen portrait of what you did, because it was quite remarkable. So could you tell us about what you did, please?
Yes, and I just want to say Rusalera was a town of 60,000 people, so it's not a really big town. But I think maybe maybe I'm going to say something really strange, but maybe it's easier for smaller towns to implement a plan and to see the first effects of it really quite quickly, as is to bigger towns that have other issues to deal with that are also challenging. So let's say we experienced that. So we worked on different things. We worked on the vacancy property rates. So we in Belgium have a legislation where after 1 year of vacancy, we can implement property rates. So if the shops are empty, we can tax them. And even last year, we doubled this. So those are really high rates. Some go in the 15 to 20,000 euros per year that they are empty. And what we saw was in the beginning, when we implemented the plan, no property owner wanted to talk to the city council. They all said, you don't know nothing. We know retail. We know what we're doing. We know our the people who we rent to and so on. But after a few years, and you saw the vacancy rates going up, and they needed to pay 10 or 15,000 euros to the local council, we sat them on the table, and they were exempt if they were willing to cooperate with our local government, and we could choose whether we had a pop-up store in one of their properties. So we had the stick, meaning the rate, the fine, and then we had the carrot. We say, okay, if you give the property to our local council and we can rent it out for a year, then we will exempt you from paying the rent. So taxes are one thing, but then you have to have like something else you put in if they want to cooperate with us. And I think we were the first in Belgium in 2015 that used this system. And now there's a lot of local councils who work with that. Also, I think the communities, I've heard it before, but just make sure that they are willing to write the vision and the plan with you. That was also one of the first things we did when we launched the city centre plan. We had a very public display of the city centre plan. So we launched it. We had a speaker, it was Bill, and then the mayor, and then all the chairman of the local communities. They had to sign very publicly the deal, and it was like very symbolic, but they were all in the newspapers. They were all in front of the plan. So they had to advocate and help to install the plan. So on public domain, also the smart mobility is also something we did. Like we worked with a sensor in the high street that was shop and go, and people could drive in the high street, park their car free. They didn't have to take a ticket or anything like that, just park the car above the sensor, and they could park for a half hour for free. We were also one of the first cities in Belgium to implement this. So those were all the things we put together, and we had a square that in the center of our city that was just full of cars, and the mayor decided to make it green, and there was a statue in the middle of the square that was our local figure, known figure, and beforehand he was surrounded by cars, and now he is surrounded by green in an agreeable. Now there is even horeca, there are terraces there. So I think for smaller cities and smaller communities, with a little changes here and there and some smart thinking, and you do not always need a lot of money, you can make some really big changes. So I don't know if that totally answered your question, Patricia, but yeah.
It did perfectly answer the question, because it's a big story, but I think you gave us some of the key elements of it, and those little changes and giving people confidence and bringing the community in is absolutely essential.
Maybe just a little bit something. We had a library in the center of our town, so we closed all our libraries in the region, in the suburbs. And there we work together with the hospital, the local hospital, to have blood pressure measured, to have your blood taken, or a heart exam. And there's one thing we haven't mentioned yet, and it's health. Health will be important now, but also over the next couple of years. And if you have a local hospital where you can work together with the library and the local council, and maybe you do something for food, healthy food, you work together with the horeca, that's our sort of things. Those are small things. Every city can work with this, can have some creative ideas. But this was also one of the things we implemented.
So that was referenced earlier on about the importance of public services, and that's absolutely vital. So I'd like to come back to that point. And there's a question which links perfectly to your point, Vanessa, about size being important, which is, and I think there might be a mistype in this. So I'm going to interpret it, if I may, John Gardner. Do not limit your vision. How do you devote the vitality of the large cities to ensure medium-sized towns can other, it says, the range of lifestyles for both new and current residents? So I think, for my interpretation of that question, and I hope I'm right, John Gardner, is that how do we make sure that the smaller towns and places around those big cities can actually thrive and not be swamped out by those big cities? So, that's about what do we do about that, guys? So it's not all big and drowning out the small. So, Kirsten, having worked in Birmingham and Shrewsbury?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is we are starting to see that change anyway, are we, in terms of thinking about where people are working? And actually, it's those larger cities that have got those a significant proportion of their activity is devoted to kind of office workers going in and using those ecosystems, that actually has now been displaced or is now placed closer to people's homes, closer to some of these smaller towns and villages. And we certainly feel that Kingston, whilst a large town centre, has benefited from more folks being at home and actually refinding their town centre, refinding what's on their doorstep, and perhaps refostering a loyalty to it that it didn't have before. So I think there's something to watch in terms of local town centres having more of a share of the cake. But my worry on that would be it shouldn't be at the expense of our large city centres, because we need them too.
Great, thank you very much. David.
So I started by saying every place is unique, and you've got to find the features of that place that suit its community, that respond to their needs, and that will make a place thrive. And I think, not wanting to just repeat that, but that's the answer to this question, isn't it? It's cities have an important role to play. They're always going to be places where people come together, where ideas are shared, where, you know, big institutions are based, so that it's, because they're so much more connected than other places, people can get there, can collaborate, can do certain things together. I think increasingly we'll see them as places to live as well. You know, as the kind of office offer perhaps declines slightly in some of these places, it will create opportunities to respond to the housing crisis we've talked about today, to increase leisure uses, and that will draw people in, because they'll become places people want to live, because they'll have leisure activities and other facilities on their doorsteps that in some other places they might not have. And as people can work from home who perhaps don't want to be in a city, you'll get into those smaller towns and into villages. People will want different lifestyles. The character of places will be different. And it's about the people who are responsible for shaping those places, the local authorities, key stakeholders, key residents, recognising the things that that place is famous for and can be successful by doing, and doubling down on it, creating distinctiveness, and not just trying to copy everyone else. Because that's been the challenge of the last 20, 30 years. And Bill Grimsey does a better description of it than I do. But, you know, the clone town, the high street you can walk down, that was in hundreds of towns up and down the country that had all the same shops on it. That's the thing that I think COVID and the acceleration of changing trends will kill. I think the opportunity, responding to John's question, is for places to find their purpose. And in finding their purpose, creating their vision and garnering support around it, you know, the Warsauls, the Bishop Aucklands, etc. of this world will be successful, and they'll all be different.
Thank you very much indeed, David. Tom, and then Vanessa, and we're getting close to wrapping up. So thank you.
Well, I should say Councillor Gardner is the portfolio holder at Stevenage Borough Council, so we have the pleasure of working together. I think the way I interpreted the question was a bit about making sure that the changes being made are good for the current residents and those who use the town, and for those who may be attracted in the future. And I think you can see different layers to how that can play out. So creating housing in a town or city centre might bring a bit of a younger demographic, and depending where you are, might bring newcomers into the area, which has got real benefits, new creativity, and helping tackle housing need and bringing new entrants to the workforce locally. But equally, I think sometimes you can pick up an undercurrent of what about us? What about those who've got a long-term stake, who might have grown up here? And I think there can be a bit of a challenge in that some types of projects, regeneration projects, can happen quicker than others. So some of the leisure facilities projects can take a bit longer to get the money together, but you have to find ways of showing people who currently live in a place and would be attracted to live in a place that they both share the same stake in great leisure, great culture, great places to work. But I think through hard experience of recent years, I don't think it's not always plain sailing to get that across.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Gardner, I'm even more sorry now that I probably didn't interpret your question well. So Vanessa, last word, and we'll need to be brief, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Well, a lot of things were mentioned, but also in a smaller town, the rent rates are lower. And as we see in Belgium, there is a lot more less vacancy rates in the smaller centers around a big town than there was, let's say, a few years ago, and where there is in big cities. So there are lower rent rates. There are more local starters. Now I've heard some colleagues of mine of smaller cities, really small cities, that say we have a lackage of space where we can accommodate them. So maybe that's an answer, that I think people go back local and they get to know their cities more because they stay there, they work there. And I think there is really a big future for the smaller communities.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I've got to close in a moment, and I just want to say a big thank you to our wonderful panel and our attentive audience and Real Estate Live for giving us the opportunity for this fascinating discussion. There's so much more that we could continue to talk about. There's a lot that was common threads throughout, and we've talked about that in terms of the public realm, the public domain, as Vanessa talked about it, as the importance of vision and knowing your place, which was all, and that diversification was all music to my ears. And David's point about ameliorating clone towns, and I think back to the days when I was running Central London Partnership and we were establishing the initial business improvement district movement into London and the UK, and then Kingston pipped us to being the first voted in bid by about 2 seconds. But hey, that's another story. The point of this is that, you know, we've done amazing things over the past 20 plus years, and the efforts we've put in our towns and centres. And to a certain extent, I was thinking, well, why have we still got a problem? But actually, we had a problem. We did so much at the same time as we were also responding to globalization and growth and a whole road of economic shift. And we didn't see the unintended consequences of a lot of these relatively positive things in time. So I would ask in all of this, as we go into our day jobs and take forward some of the fabulous lessons we've heard today and more besides, is that we keep taking the pulse of our places and we don't put in these long-term plans and visions that we've talked about. And I know you won't be doing this, our wonderful panel, but we iterate and we keep checking what people need and what people are responding to and what our towns and places need, so they can be dynamic rather than one size fits all for the next however many years while the world changes around us, which takes us to my other point, which is the importance of dynamic leadership. And clearly we've got 4 very dynamic leaders on this Zoom with us today. And I really would like to thank you for your time and everybody else that's been listening. And back to Catherine. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thanks very much, Patricia, and to all of you. It's been fascinating. Some really good conversations and ideas there, and I know that those will continue, I'm sure, offline with many people that are watching. So thank you all for being involved, and thank you to everyone that's been watching and taking part with your questions. I'd just like to remind you that we are here for the rest of the week. This is the last session of today, but coming up on your screens now is what we have coming up tomorrow. We're off to Belfast first thing in the morning. And then we're looking at sustaining high streets in city centres, the future of community engagement, and then we're looking at the innovation core. So lots more discussions to be had, lots more there's even more than that. Look, there's a second slide. It's a busy day tomorrow. We're looking at healthy guarding communities and exploring the G in ESG. With Bob Wiley. So I'm sure there's something for everyone there. Thank you again to everyone for taking part, and we look forward to seeing you at a Real Estate Live session again soon. Thanks very much and goodbye.